arm or the leg. If you can identify them on these models, know them on these models, not these ones, okay? So something like your deltoid you can see here, but your deltoid is here. So you're more likely to have your deltoid labeled on this model than on this model, because these models are for head, neck, and torso. So I use those for those muscles only. Does that make sense? So something like your gluteus maximus, the booty, is going to be on the leg model. Okay. All right. So the first muscle that it wants is going to be, or the first muscle on the list is the frontal belly of the epicranium. The frontal belly of the epicranium is just right here. It's this forehead muscle that's right on the front. Okay, so it's an easy one. Then you have the occipital belly of the epicranius. This whole white piece on the top is the epicranial aponeurosis. It connects the frontal belly to the occipital belly. So if you go to the other side of this epicranial aponeurosis, this is your occipital. It should be probably lower on this model, but it's not. This is your epicranius. So on these models as well, if you guys come and look around at them, there's a muscle right at the back, and that will be the occipital belly of the epicranius. Okay. Then you have the orbicularis oculi. The orbicularis oculi is this round muscle that surrounds the eye. Okay. So orbicularis oculi. And then you have two muscles. You have the zygomaticus major and the zygomaticus minor. These two can be annoying to find for a lot of people. A lot of people point at like a couple of these and they're usually wrong. This one is definitely the zygomaticus major. This is not the zygomaticus minor. So when you're looking at them, this is a levator palpebra. This is a completely different muscle that comes off of your orbicularis oculi. This is your zygomaticus minor here. It is going to be a little bit deep. Okay? So you have zygomaticus minor and then zygomaticus major. Same thing when you're looking here, you have your zygomaticus major and then minor. Okay? And one thing to remember for muscles, oftentimes when it has a major and a minor, they are named for their sizes. The major is larger and the minor is smaller. But for something like your rhomboids, you can see this very clearly, and this helps you remember the pattern. The major is usually inferior, it's usually on the bottom, and then the minor is superior. So that'll help you remember the order for all of your major and minor muscles, because they're grouped together, and the minor is usually superior. This is just because the larger muscle tends to be on the bottom. This isn't like a solid pattern that you can find, but for the muscles that I have you identify for your master list, you will see this pattern. Okay? So, I have a front of this little guy. So we have the zygomaticus major and minor, and then you have the orbicularis oris, is the round muscle around the mouth, same as the round muscle around the eye, so orbicularis oculi, and then orbicularis oris. And then you have the mentalis. The mental is your chin. So this is because they named it that because of the thinker pose. When you have like the thinker pose, where do you put your hand? On your chin, right? So right here on your chin is always going to be things that have to do with mental. So your mentalis is right here in the center. It's this little number 20 here on this model. But there will be like a little triangle right in the front on the chin, and that is always your mentalis. Okay? Then we have the buccinator. You guys will say this all kinds of ways. It is Buccinator, and it is pronounced buccinator. I learned this because there were 4 anatomy and physiology instructors that we were all arguing over how to spell it or how to say it, because we all said it in a different way. I think I called it the buccinator because it sounded like Terminator, so I remembered it better that way. But we got into huge arguments, and then we actually looked it up on a bunch of sites, and it's buccinator, so that you pronounce both C's. Okay? The buccinator is going to be right here, and it is deep to this muscle that you guys aren't learning. So this is the buccinator here, that is the deep muscle, okay? And if you look at this model, on this side, muscles are cut and reflected. So this is what the buccinator actually looks like if you don't have a muscle in the way, okay? So then you have the masseter. Your masseter is for chewing. So your masseter is going to be this strong muscle here that goes basically from your cheekbone and it goes down to the jaw. And what this does is when that contracts, it forcefully elevates your mandibles so that you have extreme power when you chew. So your masseter is actually one of the strongest muscles that you have in the body for how much force it can generate so that you can masticate your food, okay? So then you have the temporalis. The temporalis is going to be kind of towards where your temple is. It's going to be on the temporal bone. So this is the temporalis on this model. It's not quite as good. This one is the better temporalis that we have because you can actually see that it comes up to the temple. But the temporalis is just going to be basically on the side of the head, okay? Then you have the sternocleidomastoid. We're getting into the neck muscles now. When we get into the neck muscles, it gets a little bit more complex and everybody starts freaking out because they've all got very similar names. For all of the neck muscles, they are going to be named for their origins and insertions. Sternum refers to what? Woo. Sternum. Sternum. Does anybody know what cleido means? Cleido means clavicle. Okay. And then mastoid would refer to what? That was on your bone practical. That process, which is the mastoid process, right? So you have the sternocleidomastoid is going to have to go sternum, clavicle, and then has to go up to the mastoid process. The only muscle that looks like it does this is this big one right here in the front. It's got two spots that it goes to, one to the sternum, one to the clavicle, and then it goes all the way back up to where you would have the mastoid process, okay? So this is your sternocleidomastoid, is this big neck muscle in the front. Then you have the scalenes. For the scalenes, don't try to find them on these models. Don't try to find them on this model. There's only one model you can see all three scalenes on. The only model you can see all three scalenes on is going to be this one, because on this side, they have cut and reflected a lot of the muscles. So the scalenes are a deep group, so you have to have muscles cut and reflect to see them. So for those three muscles, they're right here. You have anterior, middle, and then posterior. And it just goes 1, 2, 3, okay? So you have anterior, posterior, and middle. And then we have the digastric after the scalenes. For the digastric, it's basically going to be a muscle that's underneath. So on this model, it doesn't really show the digastric, but on this model, you see the digastric really well. Digastric means two bellies. So you have a muscle here that has one belly here, and then a second belly as it's going back. So that is going to be your digastric. It is number 22. So when you have a chance, grab this model to look at the digastric. It's right here as this double-bellied muscle. Okay? Gastro means stomach, di means two, so this is two-bellied muscle because it gets pinched by a piece of connective tissue, like a little ring of connective tissue that makes it look like it's got two fat bellies. Okay? Then you have your sternohyoid, your thyrohyoid, stylohyoid, sternothyroid, and omohyoid. A bunch that all sound the same because they are all going to have some connection to either thyroid cartilage or the hyoid bone. Thyroid cartilage and the hyoid bone are both going to be at the voice box or the larynx. This is your voice box right here. This blue that you can see is thyroid cartilage. You basically have these two very large wings of thyroid cartilage that make up the majority of the voice box. Sitting right above it is the one bone of the body that does not articulate with any other bone in the body, and that is your hyoid bone. Okay? So the hyoid bone is only connected by muscle and cartilage. It has no connection to any other bone in the body. So the hyoid is a very important structural bone for being something that all of these muscles attach to. Most of these neck muscles can be seen really well on this model. You can find a few on these, but only the superficial ones. Okay? So the superficial ones that you can find would be something like right here in the center is your sternohyoid. The sternothyroid is deep to it, so you can only see the sternohyoid on this model. But on this model, when you take off the muscles, remember that this half of the model has muscles cut and reflected. This side of the model is all superficial muscles. Does that make sense? So on this side, since they're cut and reflected, you can actually see a muscle that runs right behind the sternohyoid. This muscle that runs right behind the sternohyoid here is your sternothyroid. Okay? And this is because they go sternum to hyoid and then sternum to thyroid cartilage. Okay? The sternothyroid is deep. Okay? And then we have the thyrohyoid can only be seen on this one, and it can only be seen on the superficial view on this one side. I knocked off his belly, I think. So if you're over there, you're going to have trouble seeing this. There's one muscle right here that goes from the hyoid bone. This little triangle right here is your thyrohyoid. Okay? This is where you can see the thyrohyoid, only here. This is a different muscle entirely, but this one little triangle is your thyrohyoid. On the other side, that muscle is removed, so you can only see it on this side of this model for the thyrohyoid. Okay? You can kind of see like an edge of it here, but it's not great. And then you have omohyoid. Omo is another prefix for shoulder. So omo means that you have a muscle that goes from your shoulder, and then it has hyoid in it, so it goes from your shoulder all the way to your hyoid bone. So the omohyoid is going to be this muscle here that starts at the hyoid, and then it goes all the way to the edge, and you can see it extending towards the shoulder, right? It's going to go all the way back and insert onto the scapula. So this is your omohyoid here. On these models, you can see your omohyoid as the muscle directly on either side of the sternohyoids. You have omohyoids that go out to the side. Okay? So usually if I tag this model or I tag that model, the omohyoid will have a sticker on the front, and then it'll have a sticker on the side. So you'll have two stickers for the omohyoid just because you should be able to trace the whole thing all the way to the shoulder. Okay? And then the last one is the stylohyoid. The stylohyoid can only be seen on this head model. It is number 20 right here. So this is the styloid process. This is the hyoid bone. This is the stylohyoid. Okay? You can also see it on this side here as number 20. Both number 20s are the stylohyoid. You can only see it on this model for the stylohyoid because it's a deep muscle. Okay? So that's all of your hyoid muscles.